In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you my biggest technique takeaways from the World Swimming Championships this year in Singapore. I advocate watching these elite swimming competitions because they provide such a fantastic opportunity to learn from the very best swimmers and understand how you can improve on your swimming technique across all 4 strokes. So if you would give this video a like, I would very much appreciate it. And remember to follow and subscribe for more swimming content. But otherwise, let's dive in straight into the first technique. Now, you may already understand how to do this. You may already be doing this in your swimming technique. So feel free to disregard that advice if you are that advanced. However, these were just the most interesting points for me and wanted to share them with you in case they weren't something that you had picked up upon. So first one in the front crawl, and I got this one from watching Katie Ledecky in the 15 and 1800 meters, where she just blows everything out of the water. It's absolutely incredible watching her and how fast she is over such a long distance and is able to maintain that speed. And one of the reasons that I felt as though she was able to do that in watching her was watching her underwater arm movements, where her pull was very close to her body. Naturally, she was keeping the elbow up high towards the surface of the water, if you imagine me swimming in that direction, but her pull came very close to her chest, very close to her centerline without going over it, but getting it nice and close, instead of me where I just follow this line here, where she was sort of coming more towards her body. And from a physics perspective, it makes absolute sense why she is doing this, because when you are trying to exert force in that direction, naturally it's easier to do this closer to your body. You get the most bang for your buck in pushing down here, as opposed to if you're trying to push out here or even out here like I am, as close as you can get to your body, because that generates the most force in that direction. So that is the first key takeaway from me. Thank you to Katie Ledecky for, well, thank you for the World Swimming Championships for being able to provide the underwater footage so that we can examine what Katie is doing under the water. And now moving on to technique part number 2, very similar, but comes in the butterfly events. And again, I got this from watching Summer McIntosh, watching the underwater footage of what she is doing in her race. And very similarly, she's getting her arms nice and close to her body when doing the stroke. Again, normally in my butterfly, I'm just coming down through this, trying to pull the water like that. And from that physics perspective, once again, I think I'm not as efficient as Summer McIntosh or Katie Ledecky in the freestyle, because I want to be pushing that force as close to my body as I can to get the most bang for my buck. And when I tried this out in my most latest training session, although I wasn't sure whether I was going faster or not, my stroke definitely felt more smooth and efficient. It felt a lot easier to push my hands through the water coming close to my chest than it did going through there. So I think that making this technique change is going to help improve my stroke rate, get faster stroke, meaning that I can get more strokes in throughout the course of the 50, or just travel faster, essentially. So I think this one is going to benefit me. Naturally, I have to try it out either in a practice race or a race environment to see just whether it actually does benefit me in this regard. But I'm quite hopeful for some gains just through that technique alteration alone. So again, keeping the arms very close to the body as you're executing your stroke on those 2 strokes where you've got that downward pulling motion. Next, moving on to the breaststroke. Again, watching Kate Douglas. Yeah, they all seem to be female swimmers that I'm taking my technique takeaways from today. But on the breaststroke, when she was gliding out, I noticed that as soon as she reached the top of the recovery phase and moving on into the glide, she was gliding with her arms stretched out this way. And from a physics perspective, I'm unsure, because logic dictates you want to stay nice and streamlined, and therefore I would have thought that staying in this position as you glide through the water would result in you experiencing less drag. So I would have thought that this technique, which I do, would be more beneficial. However, I've thought about it from another way, and I think the reason why Kate and other swimmers, after hitting recovery, move into this position for the glide phase of their breaststroke is so that it means that they can earlier execute their next stroke, so that they don't lose time going from here to here and in. Instead, they're here, here, and then when they're ready after their glide, they're already able to execute that next pull, as opposed to having to get in position after their glide from there to there, which wastes time. So a bit of an interesting one that I'm not quite sure from a physics perspective which works most. However, it definitely seemed to work for Kate Douglas. And naturally, keeping your stroke nice and smooth, being able to execute the next stroke quickly without any obstacles to you doing that is very important, because any microsecond that you lose in starting your next stroke, whichever stroke that is, over the course of a race really compounds to create a significant addition to your time. So I think this is why she does it and where she gets the gains from. If you know why it's a beneficial way of doing things and why all the top swimmers seem to be doing it, then please let me know down in the comments. I'd be very intrigued to know, because yeah, just from a physics perspective, I'm not sure, because I would have thought that would be more beneficial from maintaining a streamline. Then moving on again, breaststroke again. So again from Kate Douglas, because she just absolutely destroys the field, especially in the 200 meters breaststroke. Again, I'm picking up breaststroke technique tips here, more so because breaststroke is probably my weakest stroke out of the four, and as a result, it just means that when it comes to picking up new things, it's where I've got the most to learn, and therefore is the stroke where I'm picking up the most tips. So in actually watching Kate Douglas's body movement throughout the course of the 200 meters breaststroke, whenever she comes up out the water, she rolls really nicely into her next stroke, and it's one continuous movement. So she comes up but then rolls into the next motion like that. Really hard to describe without you actually seeing the video. And I thought that this was the key difference between her and other swimmers, because when watching her competitors, they seem to be jerking upright like that before moving into the next stroke, where Kate was just able to throw herself into the next stroke in a nice smooth motion, and as a result just cut out that jarringness from the transition from one stroke into the next. And I thought this was really interesting. Maybe I'm just imagining it and that all the other breaststrokers were doing the same, but it just seemed to me, watching her versus the others, they were all coming up, sort of putting on the brakes in bringing their chest out so high, whereas Kate, as I say, was transitioning nicely into just into the next stroke, which, as I say, with some of the other technique tips that I'm sharing with you today, any time that you can save from transitioning from one stroke into the next, or executing your next stroke over the course of a race, especially the longer races, are going to compound and result in some serious time savings. Now, before I move on to the last technique tip, if you are looking for some help with your training, you're looking to train faster on limited swim time, or you're just looking to enjoy training because it's just come a little bit boring, you're feeling absolutely exhausted, then head on over to westcough.com and check out my bootcamp and program, which will help you both to find the joy in swimming training once more without exhausting or boring you. So head on over to westcough.com and check out my bootcamp and program. Finally, moving on to the final tip, and again, it's breaststroke. Didn't get the opportunity to watch all that much backstroke, so partially a reason why I'm sorry, backstrokers, I don't have any technique tips for you in this video. But just watching leg kick, their knees were quite close to their body, as in, yeah, I'm really struggling to describe this without a visual aid, but their knees were only slightly out at angles before initiating that leg kick. They weren't coming out wide here and trying to get the widest area. It was keeping their leg kick relatively close to their body. So they're stretched out like that as they glide. They're coming in like that and then whipping around like that, as opposed to trying to get the widest area across that. And for me, I think here it's a trade-off, because in getting the widest area, obviously that's going to be most effective in providing propulsion for your glide, because you're catching the most water and therefore generating the most force. However, that's counterbalanced by creating more drag, because the wider that you come out with your knees, the more drag you're creating, because you are creating bigger surface area when you're traveling through the water. So I think this one here is an interesting trade-off in the breaststroke. Whilst you may be giving up a little bit of your propulsive force, you're gaining in the minimization of drag, and as a result leads to the best compromise between the two. So a very interesting technical element to the breaststroke. That is it for today's video, and if you've enjoyed it, please give it a like. Remember to follow and subscribe for more swimming content, and to swim faster on limited training time, head on over to westcough.com. Otherwise, see you in the next video.